You are tuned in to a fireside chat with Zany Mystic. Join us now on another exciting metaphysical journey. Relax, tune in, drop out, and take a seat by the fire as we explore new realms and possibilities. This is Magenta Pixie. You can find me at magentapixie.weebly.com. But now, here is Zany Mystic and guest. Enjoy the show.
Greetings, and welcome to a fireside chat with Zany Mystic. I'm your host, Lance White. Today marks a shift in consciousness with my guest, Julian Rose, in Poland. Julian is a champion of organic farming and a hands-on president of the International Coalition to Protect the Polish Countryside. He and his partner co-launched a highly successful campaign for a GMO Free Poland while leading a high-profile defense of peasant farmers who he holds up as the true guardians of biodiversity throughout the world. Regular listeners to BBC Radio, Farming Today, will have heard Julian's 2007 series of once-monthly Letters from Poland, passionately highlighting the crisis provoked by forcing corporate globalization onto traditional family farming communities. As a result of their efforts, there are now GMO-free zones established in Poland, leading the way throughout the global community. Additionally, Julian is a brilliant author whose articles pierce to the very core of one's being. I first stumbled across his article, Reverse Engineering the Illuminati, and another one that is becoming viral here is Learning from Indigenous Wisdom and Knowledge to Change a Society, a Cultural Revolution in Activism is Needed. His first book is called Changing Course for Life. He has a new book coming out this month in November, and it's available at Amazon Books, and it's called In Defense of Life, Essays on a Radical Reworking of Green Wisdom. You can find all of his material, books, research, and thoughts on his website, www.julianrose.info. So it's a great honor to welcome Julian to the show now. Hi, Julian. How are you?
Hi, Lance. Thank you for that very nice introduction. And I'm very well, as a matter of fact. I've noticed a lot of people around here are sniveling and coughing a lot, but I seem to be getting through pretty well at the moment.
Oh, good. Do you have chemtrails over there as we do?
Oh, my goodness, yes. I'm sorry to say we certainly do. In fact, they've been very bad for the last year or two, particularly. We've had a bit of a pause in the last month or so, but you know how they do it. They move in blocks across the planet. And, you know, they take on one whole area, and then they move to another area, and another. It's very methodical. I researched all this material a number of years ago, and I'm sure you did, and we are now familiar with the fact that this is a pseudo geoengineering effort, which is having highly deleterious effects on nature and on people, and it's not helping those who are sick, it's making them sicker, isn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, my research indicates that they're using nanotechnology to literally terraform the whole planet. And they want to, it's part of the transhumanist agenda, to have nanobots literally take over the human body, all organic material, rocks, stones, earth, sky, plants, everything. And at that point, they will be able to literally control everything that is. We will all be... The original effort was to microchip us, and when that became too known, they kept that to the corporations that could enforce it and the military, so those people have to have microchips. And they're also secretly microchipping babies and other people. Some say that 80% of the population has been secretly microchipped. You know, I think that they can put those things in viruses as well. So I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but I'll let you share what you feel.
Well, actually, I mean, I think you're right. Essentially, the world has been moving steadily in this direction I don't know for how long, but certainly the last 400 to 500 years. And I think if you do more careful research, you'll say for the last 2,000 to 4,000 years. The point is, with the availability of highly developed modern technologies, which have basically been developed in the military spectrum, after all, there is now the possibility to virtually control our minds on a daily basis. And once you've got a combination of HAARP, the High Auroral Atmospheric Research Project, and chemtrails, you've got a combination of two things which play on each other and enable messages and perhaps even illnesses, viruses, whatever you like, virtually to be transferred directly from various levels in the outer space, or at least in the ionosphere, to Earth and into people. And that level of into people is being performed quite often via the use of the wireless masts connected with mobile phones. So then you've got the whole issue of electrosmog coming into the picture as well. So Lance, look, you and I obviously are aware that this is a huge issue, hugely dangerous issue, to which to fight this thing, we have to have a very radical, strong and earthed type of approach, which really gets us back to the subject that we were discussing about this program, which is how can human beings go forward in a condition where the type of technologies and the type of mind control and the type of mind of people who want to, after all, megalomaniacs who want to take a controlling influence over the whole planet, how can we combat these? This becomes a major, major question in all our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in your video, which is on YouTube, on I don't know what the channel is. You should mention ICPPC, I think. You have a video, The New Resistance by Julian Rose. People can Google that. And it's a film by Nick Brazil. And it's a wonderful, clear message and actions that we can take that are necessary. So, and then none of these are radical in any way that are they're not designed to injure or attack or try to fight what's going on, because that only makes it stronger. But
well
one
said.
of the techniques,
absolutely.
I love your line. Put your money where your heart is.
You put your money where your heart is. Yes, that's right. Now, this issue in defense of life, the name of the book, and all the other essays I've been writing particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, have really come to me as a result of having been involved in what you might call frontline campaigning on a very, very basic sort of level. And for instance, what you mentioned in the introduction about Poland, I've been an organic farmer for 25 years in England, and the first issue I came up against in a major way was trying to persuade government authorities that it was possible and highly desirable, both from the point of view of human health and the health of the environment, that the government policy moved in a direction of sustainable ecological farming techniques and away from a reliance on heavy agrochemical use. Now, in the years of the 1980s in England, there was a surplus of produce, and they were worried about this surplus. Food was being dumped everywhere, it was being dumped on the third world, dumped everywhere. So they wanted to cut back on the surplus, and the surplus was roughly 15 to 20%. So we thought, this is really interesting, because nitrate fertilizer, which is a synthetic fertilizer, nitrate, it's a synthetic fertilizer, it's toxic, is highly deleterious once it gets into water sources. It ruins the water, basically, that we're drinking. That fertilizer is responsible for creating a 20% extra growth rate in plants. So in other words, in your wheat, barley, oats, rye, all the basic substantial grains that we need for human living, they're getting an extra kick from nitrate fertilizer, which gives you an extra 20%. So we said, look, organic farming produces 20% less, but it's real food. It's food which hasn't had this luxury. Yeah. And we went to government and we said, this is the solution for you. All you have to do is get away from the use of nitrates. And incidentally, the use of nitrates weakens the DNA of the plant. Once the plant's cells are weakened, it then requires pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides to support it. You see? So it's a wheel. It's an agrochemical wheel. And you can't get off it. Once you start with the nitrates, you're on that wheel, and there's no coming back. Yeah. So I spent maybe 5 years with colleagues in the organic movement, this is in the very early days, putting a message across which had absolute common sense as the bottom line. But they nodded, said, yes, very interesting, yes, of course, yes, but absolutely nothing was done. And I learnt the hard way that government is in the pocket of these huge corporations. You know, that was my first major lesson.
Well, it has to be learned. And, you know, over here in the United States, we haven't quite figured that out yet. I mean, people are kind of suspicious and they kind of know, but there's a wink-wink, good old boy philosophy that has been programmed into our thinking and way of life. And as you know, mind control takes us the rest of the way.
Indeed it does. And, of course, advertising, television. Edward Bernays. What can you say? I mean, the statistic is, in England, the average time spent watching television is 4 hours a day. Wow. I bet in the States it's 5, and maybe even 6.
Oh, easily.
You are getting something like...
And then there's cell phones.
Exactly. And then there's the computer.
And now they've got the cloud. So they're literally moving us into a virtual reality in which we are not present any longer, but we are unconscious sources of food for that which is higher and invisible and which feeds off of us.
Well said. My goodness me, yes. Now we're really going deep fast, aren't we, Lance? I must admit. But, you know, that is certainly the case. We are living in a virtual reality world. And if you're living in a virtual reality world and you wake up to the fact that you're living with one, then you have to figure out what are the steps to take to get out of it.
Right.
Now, so what I always prescribe as the first step to get out of it is to get yourself what I call earthed. Another word for that might be rooted. And I always use the example of a tree. It's a beautiful example. And for instance, in my forest in England, my organic farm is around 900 acres of land, and I have half farmland, half forest. So I'm used to being a forester as well as a farmer. And the forester side of me has spent many years exploring and researching trees. And the fascinating thing about a tree is, you know, you put a seed in the ground, let's say an acorn from an oak tree, and what does it do? It does two things simultaneously. It puts roots downwards, and it puts a trunk upwards. But they happen simultaneously. You see, what we often say is, it's one or the other. You know, you go up or you go down. But it's not true. You go up and down at the same time.
Exactly.
Now, by doing that, you put roots in. And once you've got roots in, you've got a certain form of stability in soil. Now, if you're going to try and get off a virtual reality world, which has no stability in anything, therefore, as you quite correctly say, you are being vampired by whatever you want to call them, entities basically, that suck on you because you have no control over them, stopping them, because you're living in the same world as they are by then. So if you want to get away from that, you've got to get earthed. You've got to be a tree. You've got to get your roots down. Then you have to start either trying to grow some of your own food or going to people who grow food locally and communicating with them and learning about what real food is as opposed to what fake food is, genetically modified food, nitrate-forced food, agrochemical food, supermarket food, hypermarket food, corporate food. None of that's real food. Most of that food is so lacking in vitamins and living health that it simply isn't worth buying, you know?
Well,
so the point is there, the direct connection, if you like, between the agricultural experience or the growing experience and the earthing and being able to take some steps to get yourself, if you like, rooted is, I think, a very basic form of prescription for people who are feeling totally lost and unable to control their own lives anymore.
Well, now, I totally agree with you, and I have a few acres up here in Northern California, and I'm working on going in that direction. Every year I learn as much as I can about organic farming, and I continue to learn about the elementals and the subtle forces that are working with nature, and it's a growing experience. And of course, there's literal earthing, which is walking barefoot, which grounds you and allows the negative energy to escape, and there's sun gazing as well. So there's all kinds of things we can do here. However, as you know, if anybody is living in a large city, which is basically a sacred geometry creation by, those that are in control of the cities and in control of the world in general, they're designed to not allow us to do that. Yeah. People living in high-rise apartments and streets, and there are only trees planted for decoration. And so we are so far removed from that, how do people in Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York or London, and all the other cities in the world, what happens? How do we get the message across, and then what do they do with cell phones to their heads and jobs? And, this is a really enormous problem for everybody.
You're so right. And in fact, that is, if you like, the major question. How can one, first of all, encourage or help people in those conditions make a stand? But what comes before that even is how can one create a level of awareness in people that their lifestyle is entirely unsustainable, and that they might be in very serious trouble 1 or 2 years down the road and find themselves in a situation where they have no basic skills whereby they could look after themselves in the crisis, which may well be upon us very shortly. First of all, that's almost impossible to get that message across. But there is a but. And I'm sort of optimist, really. I think in everybody there is some type of little voice which is, in spite of everything, trying to get a message across to them. It's beavering away and saying, hey, I'm your last chance saloon. I'm trying to tell you, get out of the city, get some experience in the countryside, reawaken yourself, try and find a way to take another perspective on your lives other than the one that you're accustomed to for the last 20 or 30 years. Earning a living, 9 to 5, money, materialism, consumerism. You've got to break out. There is in everybody. That's what I was writing about in the reverse engineering the Illuminati mindset. I was saying in everybody exists this little spark of light. It may be covered by blankets and blankets and blankets of darkness, confusion, but it's still there. And somehow or other, how will people make contact with that? Now, I'll tell you one or two interesting things here, Lance. In London, and I know in New York, and I know in Paris, and I know in many other big cities, there is quite a substantial movement for what's called greening the city. And some very exciting things are going on. In London, there's a lot of what's called guerrilla gardening.
Ah, good.
Yes, and that sounds nice, doesn't it? What they do is people go out in the middle of the night with shovels and forks and spades and buckets and wheelbarrows, and under the cover of darkness, and they go out onto something like a roundabout or an area of land on the edge of a housing estate, and they simply start digging up a plot of land and sowing seeds in it. 8 months or 6 months later, all sorts of interesting produce starts to grow there.
I love it. That's a great idea.
And all of a sudden, the local authorities are saying, "Who the hell did that?" And then the local.
I love it.
It's great, isn't it? And then the local people are saying, "Hey, you don't rip that up. That's wonderful. Look, look at that wonderful cucumber that's growing there, and lettuce, and whatever it might be, potatoes and things." And so then the local authority feels basically a huge pressure by the local people not to dig it up and remove it, but to keep it. And so this sort of thing's going on. Now, there are also many small-scale organic farms springing up in the suburbs, supplying small shops, supplying farmers' markets. There are people with flat roofs growing stuff on the roof. There are people harvesting rainwater. Now, see all these different things. If you combine them all and give it all a hell of a push, you could actually see how there could be a sort of lifeline which leads, you could imagine an avenue of trees going from the center of let's say, Los Angeles, out into the surrounding countryside, where there is actual farming going on. So that avenue of trees connects the center to the outside. Symbolically, you could create an avenue of trees, and actually you could, of course, which is like a lung, which brings the fresh air in and brings people out. And then you can create a sort of artery whereby people find quite naturally they want to go out into the countryside because they've already gained a small amount of experience within the city. So to my mind, this is a sort of lifeline.
Yes, yes. Yes, that's a wonderful idea. One of the people that I haven't had on my show, but I have read his books, Michael St. Clair, he wrote some books, I think it's called Light Seeds, and he talks about establishing radiant zones, and he has done the astrology up, on into the next few hundred years, and unfortunately his vision of how quickly things change isn't as rapid as mine is, but he does suggest that those of us of like resonance and mind create resonance zones, and that are havens of consciousness and guardians of nature and energy, and that we then hook those up together in lines, in lifelines. So it's kind of like creating a new world that's outside of the matrix, and it's a subterranean, but it's also above ground as well. And then it seems that we need to be able to communicate with each other on a global level. For instance, here I am in California talking to you in Poland right now. And this is a paradigm-shifting moment, because up until now we have had very difficult time finding people in other countries that are making headway. Now, as you know, over here in the United States, we are really kept dumbed down, and people can't even get labeling on GMOs to find out if they're even in there, in the food. And the reason why is because they're in everything. They're in corn syrup. They've taken over just about every major food group that there is. And if the people don't know the damage to the organs that are caused by GMOs, then they need to do some investigative footwork, because, I'm not here to convince anybody. I already know. But, we do need to be able to hook up globally, like we're doing right now, and create, I think that will really cause a wildfire all over the world, to talk to our friends in Japan and our friends in China and our family in South America and Poland and all over the world. And because there are no barriers between conscious beings and the human heart.
Well said. That's lovely, Lance.
Thank you.
Well, I certainly find that extremely pertinent about the resonance zones, because what we talk about a lot here in Poland, Jadwiga Łopata, my partner, and myself, running ICPPC, the International Coalition to Protect the Polish Countryside, is that we need to create what we call arcs. Now, the resonance zone is the sort of spiritual, above the ground level way of forming an arc, but it also has to be done on the ground. And by creating arcs on the ground, we also will eventually find the passageways that connect one arc to another arc, just as you described resonance zones in different mediums, different areas, geographical regions, all connecting up. This is very exciting. This is very exciting, because this is the beginning of a new society, because we never incorporated the spiritual and the practical ever before.
Right.
And what we're going to do in the future is to connect the spiritual and the practical. We've always said they're separate, Yep. There's two things don't agree with one another. You can't, if you're going to be practical, you be practical. If you're spiritual, you have to be spiritual. You can't combine the two. Bullshit. That is the way forward. So what we are talking about here is we have a little eco center where I'm sitting right now, a very small farm, 1.5 hectares of land. That's about 3.5 acres. We have a small display area where we demonstrate alternative technologies, clay straw building. We have 3 clay straw buildings on the site. growing organic herbs, organic field vegetables production, some sheep, some chickens. We're virtually self-sufficient in power. And so we call ourselves an ARC. Actually, it's called ICPPC Eco Center, and it's well known in Poland. It's actually one of the only examples of its sort in Poland at the moment.
Wow.
And we're calling it an ARC, and we do talks, lectures, and workshops where we invite people to come, and we are finding gradually, dotted around this country and close by in other countries, other people working on something rather similar. And now, as everything gets worse, and it does, on the level that you describe very clearly as the virtual reality world, which is, pushing all the time, reducing mankind's freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of creativity, freedom of choice. All that is being, we can watch it being removed in front of our eyes. So we're moving more and more towards a fascistic state where a small clique of Illuminati or cabal of small people, working from this top end of the globalized corporate business world, particularly the banking world, I have to say, but also, of course, oil, pharmaceuticals, and all the rest of it. Their objective, as you rightly said, is to take total control. Now, the total control of the food chain is a major one, and that is where GMO come in. If you can get everybody to eat GMO and there's no labeling and nobody knows what they're getting, what's going to happen? I think we know. The independent laboratories, 6 separate independent laboratories in Europe, and this is in Europe, over the last 5 years, have tested GMO animal feed on rodents. Now, they've tested GMO animal feed, but at a diluted level, approximately 1/3 the normal level which is fed to animals. So it's less toxic. Over a period of 1 year, by the end of 1 year, those rodents had very serious lesions of the kidney and liver. By the middle of the second year, they had developed sterility. By the end of the second year, moving into the third, they died. Now, this work was done by the Austrian government, by the Academy of Sciences in Moscow, by the leading independent laboratory in France, by a leading independent laboratory in Italy, and they all corroborated with each other exactly the same results. Now, you never hear this. Mainstream media won't touch it. It's not supposed to have ever happened. All the information we get comes from the fact that Monsanto, Syngenta, DuPont, Pioneer tell you peer-reviewed stuff. They're fine. It works. There's no harm to human beings, no harm to animals. So we never hear the truth. The truth is GMOs are intended, I believe, and this is a conspiracy theory, but it's a very logical one. They are intended to reduce the world population by a very considerable amount via sterility. It will be probably, if we live on a diet, I think roughly 20 years, probably. If it takes a mouse or a rat 2 years to be sterile, let's say it might take a human being 20 years. But in 20 years' time, we might find that huge, huge numbers of people who have unwittingly been eating these foods actually are unable to have babies.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And how many years have passed already? 10, 12, 15?
Good question.
We don't know, because they start these programs long before it becomes public. I mean, even in the underground world. And, for instance, chemtrails have been going on for 15 or 20 years. And Correct. They're just now introducing the memes on, through spokespeople that are supposed to be at the top of the political and, geological and, the military food chain, stating that, well, we're looking into it as a way of protecting the earth. Looking into it, just look up, look fucking up, and you can see it. In the fucking skies. I'm sorry, I never swear on air, but this is just really, it's absolutely unforgivable that people can be so dumbed down that they can't even see beyond their nose and will listen to this bullshit and accept it as the truth.
It's the most incredible thing. I totally agree. I mean, I've talked to people about it, and I've asked them, I've even asked farmers, organic farming friends, I've said, when you're out there on your tractor or you're working in the fields and you look up, what do you think? And they always say, I never look up. I mean, what? You never look up? You mean you don't ever look at the sky? You don't ever look at the clouds? You never look at the weather, and you're a farmer? And it was completely and utterly illogical. You get other people simply saying, oh, haven't they always been there? I don't notice anything different. We always had those things that come out behind jet airplanes. You know, what's new about that? And yes, I totally agree with you. It is quite extraordinary that there seems to be a certain number of people who completely take it, who are appalled, angry, upset, and demanding action, but they are a tiny minority. When the sky, which represents 50% of the visual view that we have in our lives, is literally coated with chemtrails, and nobody seems to see them.
And the things that are in them are, they've analyzed them. I mean, there are all kinds of sites that have done extensive analysis. There are fibers, there's bacteria, there is aluminum, strontium. There's all kinds of shit in them, including nanoparticles. And many people have made the connection that Morgellons disease, which is where wires start growing out of your skin in the colors of red, white, and blue, and the people that have this disease go crazy because they scratch themselves practically to death, is a form of nanotechnology that is the body is trying to move out.
Yeah.
So, how does that relate to, I mean, since we're talking about organic farming, I mean, you could take it to its logical conclusion. What's the point if all of this crap is coming down and getting into the ground system, getting into the rocks, getting into the plants, but the plants filter that all out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we eat organic plants that are not intentionally that are grown with love and care and consciousness, and that have phytonutrients within them, then they should, in theory, take out all of the metallic elements that are falling down from the skies constantly. It seems, but there must be some point of saturation where even a plant and a tree is unable to do that, just like our bodies. That's why they break down and we get arthritis and diseases and things like that, because the body can no longer remove all of the stuff that we're putting in it, and that's being put in it without our awareness or consent.
Yes. I mean, there you have to consider that the immune system is an absolutely crucial factor. If we have a very strong immune system, if we have an immune system that's been challenged regularly during our lives, and I'm talking about it in a positive sense. Now, I'll give you an example of that. Say you drink mostly semi-skimmed pasteurized milk, and then someone comes down the road from a local farmer who's been producing real milk, unpasteurized milk, straight from the cow, and gives it to you. People say, "Oh Christ, I couldn't drink that." No, that hasn't been properly processed. That wouldn't be safe. That would cause a big problem for me. I don't dare touch it. And the majority of people would act that way. And if it comes straight from a cow, that's rather disgusting, isn't it? It comes out of the udder of a cow. I didn't think milk came out of a cow's udder, though it came out of a carton in a supermarket.
With a stale date.
Yeah, exactly. But so the point there is, I grew up on this product, unpasteurized milk, and I sold it on my farm for many years, and I had to fight 2 campaigns against the government in England to stop them banning it, and I'm delighted to say we won those campaigns. Therefore, it's still available in England today. So I have a lot of first-hand experience about this, but one of the point I was trying to get to really is that if you've been brought up on these types of foods, and if, for instance, when you were a child, you crawled across the gravel path and you put stones in your mouth and you sucked them, the chances are your immune system is going to be one hell of a lot tougher than people who have only been living on processed food all their lives. You see what I'm saying? Now, that can be true of plant life. The same thing applies to plant life, tree life, etc. If those plants have been nurtured with real fertilizer as opposed to nitrate fertilizer, in other words, farmyard manure, compost, and various microorganisms that you can get in the form of putting extra life and vigor into the root system. If the root system is working really well, it will be able to stand up to far more of this exterior attack via chemtrails, via nanoparticles, via the barium, aluminium, and strontium, and all the things which are coming out of these chemtrails. It has a much better chance of resisting. However, your point is correct, that at a certain point, if the system, if it carries on indefinitely, all this spraying, even those plants will obviously succumb. So,
Right.
The point there is, everybody has to become an activist. You cannot sit on your butt all day and say, oh, God, I just hope the plants make it through. You've got to get out there and say, stop it. Stop this system.
Right.
What is it? It's less than 1% of the population are trying to kill off 99%, and we don't seem to be able to do anything about it. Yeah.
And then, but they don't quite kill us off. They just get us to the point where we need permanent medications and visits to the hospital and operations and things that are, all coordinated with the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh, yeah, well said. Exactly that. It's an incredible money-making machine. And as we know, when we've studied the Illuminati way of doing things, it moves in a very small circle. We're talking about 13 bloodline families who've been operating this way for around 1,000 years. They were called the Black Nobility back in the days of medieval Europe. And they have worked out a way through intermarriage, cousins, particularly marrying cousins, to maintain power within a small clique of people who have an agenda which is entirely unknown to the vast majority of citizens on this planet.
That's right.
And that agenda is essentially, to take over control and to rid the planet of at least 3/4 of its population, and so then they can all have big country estates like Sir Julian Rose in England, and they can live the life that they want to live. So the question that comes up, and people always ask it, and I think it's a very good question, is, what, doesn't this stuff also affect them and their children?
No, I do not think it does. And you think?
Carry on. I'm waiting for your take on it because I agree with you.
Okay, because they wouldn't unleash it unless they had the ability to resist it, and their bloodlines have been designed to not be affected by any of this and to thrive. In fact, the goal is immortality.
Yes.
So it's conceivable that they're already close or have achieved a kind of immortality. And so that means that intergenerationally they can pass on all the information that has been closely guarded for hundreds of thousands of years since the beginning of time, and held closely by the esoteric groups, the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians, whatever they are, all of the different groups, the satanic cults, the royal families, the Rothschilds and Rockefellers, because anybody that makes it that high, that's really bringing in trillions and quadrillions of dollars and owns most of the world, is part of a construct that is created outside of time and space and is manufactured to be that way as part of the control system that we're completely unaware of, because we come in an incarnational grid that's altered and we have no memory. And then we're vaccinated with, 40 or 50 vaccines now as a baby, and then we're baptized. All of these things separate us, the soul or the essence of a human being, the spirit of it, from its source.
That means that the soul of a human being, and then, of course what you described isn't a human being. It's part alien, part human being, but it's drawing this, what you described, from the alien side. That means the human being's soul, to be saved, if you like, has to reconnect with the cosmic soul, which is composed of light in many respects, not only, of course, but light is a major feature of it, what I call photon light in the article. And once we start reconnecting with the cosmic level of that power, that light, that love, that passion, Then we just start discovering who we are as human beings. Now, they don't want that to happen, of course. They want to make it impossible for us to access our souls. And they are succeeding largely, of course, as we sadly notice. But if we can break through and access our souls and start opening ourselves to that bigger, vaster cosmic light, then, of course, we start we have a completely different perspective on these people. And we start recognizing that actually we're the ones who are in control of our destinies. Exactly. We are the ones who can set the new pattern. We're the ones who are in charge of the earth. And they are simply manipulating us because we don't know it. And once we do, they lose a vast percentage of that power.
Yes, yes. And that they cannot directly access that light themselves, so they have to steal it from us and keep us unaware of the fact that they are imitators. They're cheap imitators. They take everything that's authentic and sacred and they reverse it and throw it back at us like it's the reality. And so it's very similar to the Matrix trilogy. When,
my goodness,
I think you mentioned the McDonald's arches. Well, that is, there are endless. There are books written on this subject. I mean, you can become a scholar on the use of esoteric symbols in marketing at the highest levels, and the corporations that form a figure 8 around the planet, which is the figure of infinity, and the board members that are members of all the corporations, and they just simply move around, and that's how they keep tabs on everything. The technology that's involved with this is so advanced that it's inconceivable to us, and so they keep it from us, and we're kept on oil and primitive things that destroy the earth because it makes so much money. Look at the cars people are driving today.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, we should be floating through the air.
Yeah, well said. Very good. You know something that Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World.
Yes.
He said this about technology. He said technological progress has merely provided us with a more efficient means of going backwards.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Very good.
Amazing statement, isn't it?
Yes, and then those in control meter it out, basically at their own leisure, and if they get bored, they might throw us an extra bone, or they might not. But if they can make a few trillion or quadrillion with the next generation of something, well, okay, roll it out. What the hell? Let them have the next iPhone, and let a few more Chinese people jump off the. Oh no, they don't do that because they have awnings to keep the Chinese workers from committing suicide now. So they've kind of got a fix on that one.
My God, that's incredible, isn't it? The next phase, if you like, of the battle to overcome this particular situation strikes me as being one where people have to recognize that they have to it's actually what Gandhi called the voluntary reduction of wants. Now, this is quite a profound phrase, the voluntary reduction of wants. You see, we're so used to consuming in a materialistic, neoliberal capitalist societies that we live in. We're so used to consuming. We take it so for granted, our consumption patterns, that even if we're a little bit aware, we're still basically caught in that same spiral. Actually, it isn't a spiral. It's basically a circle. It goes around in a circle. But to get off it, we have to start saying to ourselves, look, planet Earth and planet people are completely interconnected. We're part of nature. Animals are part of nature. Trees are part of nature. The Earth's part of nature. Man is part of nature. We share so much. We share a vibrational field, a resonance field, actually, almost completely. Therefore, we start taking away what we call the wants. If we can start reducing those wants, we can get closer to the essence again. But if we feel that we must have every modern gizmo, we must watch every potentially interesting television program, we must have our rock music in the evening, we must have 3 beers in order to feel calm at night,
Right.
If we feel that that's all part of still going forward, we're delusional about it. Because essentially we're still basically sucking on the same system. And not only that, we're supporting it. We're putting our money back into the very thing that we're against. I constantly, Lance, have this argument with people about supermarket shopping, and it's been the big bugaboo with me for about 25 years, because when I was on my farm, I sold everything local. I didn't sell anything in the supermarkets or anything. I sold everything locally. Fresh, local, flavorful, nutritious. And I tried to convince fellow organic farmers that it wasn't the right road to go down to get organic food into supermarkets. I said to them, look, don't you understand that the supermarket is basically going to say, oh, lovely, we'll have a little bit of green icing on our very ungreen cake. It'll represent maybe 2% of our turnover, when 98% will be exactly the same. And we'll be able to say, well, look at what we're doing. We're doing this, to make people happy who are interested in the environment. We're doing our bit to support organic food. But at the same time, they're basically destroying the planet. And if you buy into this sort of confusion, if you buy into the confusion that, well, it's cheaper, it's more convenient, it's easier, therefore I have to go to the supermarket, you cut off your own ability to become conscious and aware. Because essentially what you're doing is you're giving your money to the corporation, which when you're sitting at home or chatting with people, you're saying, those bloody corporations, how I hate them. They do this, that, and the other. But with the other hand, you're going out and there and supporting them. So the voluntary reduction in wants means cutting oneself off bit by bit by bit by bit from that, getting onto a localized or regionalized and localized connection with people who are producing quality goods, not only foods, crafts, whatever it might be.
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. A renaissance of handmade items, which has definitely been on the decline for many decades. And anybody who buys anything at any market today, tools or cabinets or anything, will tell you you can't find good ones unless you pay, beaucoup bucks to have a skilled craftsman do it. And then you're paying, tens of thousands of dollars. Well, who can afford that? Well, the people who have the money. So it's a self-perpetuating ball of shit.
It is, actually.
Well, and then I wanted to just say one thing about what you're saying, and then go back to it if you like. But then the organic food that the organic people sell to the supermarkets is then irradiated.
Mm.
So where's the organic when radiation takes out all the subtle nutrients, the phytochemicals, which cannot be even counted for, and the rest of the food is dead anyway because they only put back 5 or 6 basic vitamins and minerals in the ground to just get the vegetables to look like they're vegetables, but they have no flavor. They don't taste good, and that's why people don't want to eat them, because there's no flavor, there's no life force in them. By the time they get there, they were dead when they were pulled out of the ground by machines.
Mm. Well, the whole point there, which you're making, it's a very important one, is that basically the way the system works is that the deader the food, the safer it is.
Oh,
and you get people, largely urban people, city people, who actually think and are frightened of real food, living food. They would be quite happy to hear that organic food is irradiated. They want their supermarket to do what is called quality control. That means you're not allowed to have any bacteria of any description in your food, which means you must irradiate it. Well, that is the quickest way to kill yourself, that's for sure. You don't need GMO if you're going to eat that food. That's going to destroy your system completely. Your gut will simply pack up. You'll get cancer, you'll get all sorts of diseases, and you will never know why. But it's a fear-based phenomena, and it's based on this alienation from people to nature. And you started off the program, or early on the program, you were saying yourself, how can one possibly help or explain to people living in these large city conurbations, that their lifestyle is completely and utterly devoid of connection with the reality of life, and that they live in a world which is a virtual reality world where everything is sold to them for a reason, for money making, for profit, for power gain, and they simply become stooges, become slaves to that system.
Right.
And your example there, I think, is actually a very, very interesting one. I mean, organic food that's been irradiated. Yeah, nightmare.
Well, and then we don't even have to look far to see where other forms of radiation are being installed on us when they created fake terror events in order to install devices that, as you travel, you have to get irradiated. You get doses of X-rays. Yes. And then they have scanners in cars, in trucks that are concealed that can drive by parked cars and scan them using X-rays, looking for, weapons, drugs, or anything. So if a person is sitting in that car, they get a dose of radiation, so does their dog or cat or baby. And did you know that fluoride is put in baby food now, and in addition to being put in the water? Well, listen, before... We're going to continue talking, and we've just about run out of time on this pre-record. This is a pre-record. It will basically, we're going to be continuing this conversation, which will be available in the archives. So just for the listeners that will be hearing this show tonight at 7 p.m., let's do a formal sign-off and then stay on the line, and we're going to keep talking about this, and people who would like to hear the rest of this conversation, which will be unchained, can pull the show from the archives and hear what we talk about afterwards. So we're going to kind of officially sign off now, and I'd like to ask you, Julian, to offer your website and contact information and anything that you like before we say goodnight to the listeners at 8 o'clock.
All right, Lance, I'll certainly do that. Well, basically, anyone who would like to tune in to what it is I'm up to over here in Poland and in England and as a writer, etc., my website is www.julianrose.info, and that's JULIANROSE, all joined up, .info. And on that site, you will have information about my latest book, In Defense of Life, and also my previous book, Changing Course for Life, and many essays, as well as projects that we're involved in, etc. And you are able to make contact with me from that site, and you can talk to each other, or we can arrange for books to be sent to you. But anyway, we hope to hear from you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being on tonight, Julian, and I really hope that you can return to do many more shows here with us. I am thrilled to have discovered your work, and I just can't thank you enough for sharing your information with us here in the United States.
I'm delighted to do that. I was just about to say I'm delighted to do that, and I think that by sharing information on a global level, we're going to enlighten ourselves, and we're going to change everything. It's going to be very exciting.
Yes. So we'll technically say good night, folks, for tonight. And then we'll pause momentarily, and then you and I, Julian, will continue our conversation for however long we want, because we can do that. And then the rest of this dialogue, which will be not heard on the show, is available in the BBS archives. Okay?
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Okay. Well, I feel like I'm just starting to get wound up now.
Yes.
I mean, you are hitting the nail on everything. And I mean, it's so thrilling to have somebody of like mind that has done their homework, that knows all this, and there doesn't have to be any filtering or censoring of anything. We can just talk, because I know you know what I'm talking about, and know I know that you know that I know. And so let's continue our conversation as long as you feel comfortable. I mean, we could go on another half hour or an hour. When you feel that you need to stop or you want to take a break or something, then just let me know, and we'll do a second sign-off.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I'm up for it.
Oh, good. Okay, so we were talking about the GMOs and the rest of it. That's just the tip of the iceberg. You mentioned, let's talk about, Michael Tessarian has a lot of interesting views on the alien landscape here and the genetic manipulation that's been going on, and he uses the term, as you did, architects of control. And the huge corporations which are established now, the interlocking global corporations that are literally just choking us to death. It just seems like we're being squeezed so hard that those of us who know what's going on are just like fighting harder because we can see the rest of the people going down further the road to the path of their own self-destruction. What do you think? I mean, all we can do is set as an example, I guess, because these people make trillions of dollars, and it's ironic that on the Forbes list of the world's richest people, they list the Microsoft person who's in charge of vaccinations and the seed bank, the Reykjavik seed bank vault, where they actually have non-modified seeds for the elite. He started Microsoft. He makes about $73 billion. It goes up and down. I think the top earner has been about $75 billion. But it's such a farce because there are individuals within the royal family, there's the Vatican, the mafia, in the politics that make trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars manipulating the system, and so, this whole system is just one big, gigantic scam.
Yeah. It is one big, gigantic scam. And now the point is that once people become aware that the system is one big, gigantic scam, they've obviously taken a number of steps in their own lives to distance themselves from it. I don't think you can actually know it if you're entirely inside it.
Right.
This suggests that taking action on various levels is a prerequisite for gaining awareness. And this is where I was saying earlier on in the program that, we have to start now saying to ourselves that we must connect up what you might call our perception, our awareness, and our consciousness with the ability to take action, to go on the front foot, because most of what we've been describing is forcing humanity onto the back foot. I mean, if you're not scared, you're just overwhelmed. So it's one thing or the other. And whatever it is, people say, I simply don't think I can do anything about it. It's much too big for me. And, all I can do is try and look after my family and hope the thing doesn't cause total chaos. But that is a back foot position, and that is, of course, what they want. Yes. The question is, how do we get ourselves onto the front foot and start moving forward? Now, I was involved in this campaign in Poland, which was in the year 2004 to 2006. I met Jadwiga, my partner, who's Polish, in London at an environmental conference in the year 2000 when I was invited to meet some people from Poland and other parts of the world who were doing very special environmental projects, which were being very successful. And we met up and we had a very strong rapport, and she invited me to Poland to become part of this group. I agreed. It was just at a time when I was winding down aspects of my farm and I had a little bit of spare time. So when I came to Poland, I discovered that nobody knew what a genetically modified organism was. This is the year 2000. Nobody knew. Poland was due to join the European Union 3 years later. I said to Jadwiga, the most important thing that we can do for the international coalition to protect the Polish countryside is to start a campaign to alert people what is going to happen if they don't wake up and wake up fast. You're going to lose all your small family farms because the food chain is going to be so polluted. It doesn't matter. If they're organic, they're small, and they're peasants, and they're doing all the right type of farming, they're still going to be completely destroyed by GM, because once it gets in there, it's almost unrecallable. So I suggested, I said, look, we're not going to get there by going to central government, because central government's hand in hand with the corporations, basically. There'll be a few people who might not be, but basically they are. Right. I said, but we might be able to do it. From my own experience of working in England with regional authorities, if we go to the regional authorities and we say to them, do you care about your region? Do you care about the great reputation your region has for food quality? and beautiful biodiversity, and thousands of farmland birds and species-rich hay meadows, which have gone for all the rest of Europe. Are you proud of that? Because that's a wonderful advertisement for foreigners who want to come to Poland. And we started talking them round to the idea that this was a good message. Yeah, of course they can. So then we said, well, there's one thing that's going to completely destroy this, and you probably don't know about it yet, but it's called genetically modified organism. I suggest, you have a board meeting, you discuss it with your board, and you declare yourselves that you would like to be completely GMO-free zone. And we started off with one man in one of the provinces close to the Russian border, who was a colleague of my friend Jadwiga, and he got a small area of his province dedicated in this particular form, and they became a GMO-free zone. Well, what do you know? Fate stepped in. 6 months later, he became a senator. When he became a senator, we invited him to make a speech to the province saying he's completely won over by the fact that he recognizes now that this is a major threat to the food chain and to the biodiversity of Poland, and he thinks everyone should support this movement towards creating a GMO-free zones within the province. And we brought him to Małopolska province, which is where we are, and we got him to make the speech. And bit by bit, I'm cutting a long story short, bit by bit, each province signed up to it until by 2006, we had every province in Poland had signed up a declaration, self-declaration of being GMO-free zone. Wow. Then we said to the heads of the boards of these provinces, now write to the Prime Minister of Poland, actually to the President, I think it was, to the President of Poland, and say to him, this is not a legal possibility, this is not legalized, this is a self-declaration, this is a voluntary declaration, it's symbolic. We want an actual law which is going to stop the import and planting of genetically modified organisms. Every single board member of the chairman of province wrote to the president with this message, and would you believe it, 4 months later, he banned the import and planting of GMO in Poland. And it was the first country in the world to do it. And that was basically, this campaign was run by two people. Wow. Now, we got support, of course, and we got the support from other people, and lots of people joined in eventually. But we had the angels on our side. We were pinching ourselves. We absolutely couldn't believe what had happened, Now, I'm using this as an example, not to pat ourselves on the back and say, look how brilliant we were, but to show what, relatively speaking, ordinary human beings, when they're passionate, when they're going for something, when they absolutely believe that they can make change, the angels come and they help you. And once the angels get behind you, you can do anything.
Yes, absolutely. Bravo. Well, I was curious about that because I had the impression from reading your site that all of Poland had been declared GMO-free, but then I noticed that there were GMO-free zones, and so I wasn't entirely sure that you had pulled it off and been able to have the whole country become GMO-free. But for clarification, it sounds as if all of Poland is now non-GMO. Is that correct?
Yes, it is basically correct. But, Lance, what happens when you have a huge success like this? You absolutely enrage the Illuminati and Monsanto and the gang out there. They got absolutely furious.
They're out there dropping GMO seeds from helicopters.
Well, absolutely. And
that's what they do.
They do. They got rid of this government. This government was out 6 months later.
Oh, yes, of course.
And they introduced a government that opened its arms to the corporations, the European Union, the World Trade Organization, the Codex Alimentarius. They opened their arms to it. So we've been fighting ever since then to try and stop the rot setting in, because it's been much more difficult to do that than it was to get there in the first place. It's to stop now the behind the scenes handouts, which are going to mean that here, there, and everywhere, a little bit is put here, a little bit is put there, a little bit eventually. Poland, after all, isn't a GMO-free zone because, well, we have to be modern. We have to be like every other country. We don't want to be an anachronism and a peasant community. We want to be up there with the rest of the world, like America. We love America. America's the best example there is. That's how they talk.
Oh, geez, that's sad.
Yes, it is really sad. It is sad.
America is just I mean, we have been so dumbed down and so demolished in this country. My grandparents came out from Kansas in a covered wagon to California.
Wow.
And they were farmers, and they started the original Gaviota store, which then, this was before there were cars, and they sold bee supplies and so on. And then when cars came in, they had installed a couple of gasoline pumps. So they made plenty of money from their little Gaviota store, but they were modest people, and they didn't care about money, and they just had what they had and used it wisely. Shared it with those who needed it, and put themselves through chiropractic school. Then they traded for a ranch, a walnut ranch in Goleta, which my uncle still owns. He's an allergy specialist, and interestingly, he married an Iraqi woman whose great-grandfather was the Grand Mufti of Baghdad. So somewhere in there, there's an Illuminati connection, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But and I'm probably engineered by somebody because my grandparents were Masons, but they weren't high-level Masons. They were just good people. And so as a child, I was raised mainly on their ranch because my parents preferred to drink and party and have a good time, so they would shuffle me off to the ranch. And I learned there about you could not stop eating the fruit off these trees, apricots, peaches. I mean, it was laden. There were so many. It was like eating pure sugar. The flavor was so rich and so pure that you just couldn't get enough. And we'd go out to pick the peaches and the apples and the persimmons and the berries and they had a garden with corn and squashes, and there was at least an acre or two of squash that would just come up automatically in between the walnut trees. And so we had dozens and dozens of squashes. You could just walk out and pick one. She'd be baking and making pies. So I was really raised with a philosophy of, growing your own organic food and the flavors. This is what people don't know. Just like people who see chemtrails and they're in movies now, so everybody's being conditioned, since Hollywood is part of the machinery that keeps all this going. Everyone's being conditioned to think that they've always been there. And at some point, there won't be anybody that will remember it. And it's like that with
come
food.
Your arcs.
Yes, I love your idea of an arc. I think that is, well, of course, I guess it's not a new idea, but it's an old idea that needs to be revamped and revisited. We are the Noahs and the animals of the ark that are going to have to put ourselves in the ark. We're going to have to literally pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and create this ark. And I suspect that it's not necessarily 2 by 2. I think that was something that was planted to keep duality in place.
Yes,
I suspect that this was, like you said, there's either-or thinking, and that's what we're programmed to conceive in. But we need a language that goes beyond or transcends, is it this way or that? And everywhere you see reporting and people, they all can just say, well, is it good or is it evil? Well, is it good or bad? Is it Democrat or, none of that makes a difference. And then you have the division of the religions. So this is all being done at the level of artificial intelligence.
Very true. And I mean, that is absolutely spot on. And I had the experience earlier in my life, which is very important, really, when I left school, I was taken through the British public-private school system, which was a hellish experience, but I somehow survived it. And when I got out of it, I wanted to be in the arts, basically, and I was either interested in filmmaking or acting. And actually I went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, where I studied stage management and, to a degree, acting. And I worked in repertory theatre. But I didn't find I enjoyed it. It was too staid and too obvious for me. And I met up with a very interesting group of people, an international experimental theatre company based on the east coast of America, called the Players Theatre of New England. And long story, but anyway, they asked me to join them. And I spent the next 10 years working in experimental theatre and education work. Now, that was while my father, unfortunately, had died. My elder brother was killed in a motor racing accident, so I had already inherited, a classic British country estate and a title, a baronet, which is what I am. And
nice.
that combination of things destined me to be a landowner and try and manage my wealth and keep most people out of it. But my soul was shouting no. So luckily, my mother was able to understand this to a degree at least, and enabled me to go out into the world and try and find myself, discover who I really am. And I had about 10 years leeway between about 20 and 30 to do this in. And out of the work with experimental theater, which was very dynamic, very challenging, very creative, and made all sorts of interesting connections between working as an actor that played roles not only of human beings, but of wind, of trees, of nature, of insects, and without any costumes, and to young and old people alike. I just started discovering this wealth of creativity that I had inside me. And at the same time, I got involved in yoga practices, and I started discovering the spiritual level. So at a certain point in time, actually this is about 1983, I had to come back and take over my family farm. So I had to drop all that and become a farmer. Now, you see what I'm trying to get to, I think?
Yeah.
That is entirely practical, right? And what had happened before was what you might call the arts was entirely creative. So people said to me, oh my God, how could you do that, How could you be from an actor to a farmer? Oh my God, you poor man, What a shocking situation.
I know, I tell myself that sometimes.
So I said to them, actually, no, you'd be surprised. I said, I found a very, very strong connection almost immediately. And I'll tell you what it is, and this is, some people won't necessarily easily follow this, but in experimental theater, we were working on the connection between voice, movement, music, and text. The connection, right? The connection. Okay. So we were really going deep and finding, look, there's something underneath all those things which is motivating us. They're connected by that thing which is motivating us. And then when I got to the farming side, I met up with a group called the Soil Association, which were the originators of the modern organic movement. They were actually organizations started in 1946. But they had this philosophy that the interconnection between soil, plant, animal, and man forms the basic cycle of life in agriculture. Soil, plant, animal, and man. Voice, movement, music, and text. Now, you see, I immediately saw there was a physics which connected these two things completely. And it was the same principle, exactly the same principle. It was a cyclic principle. It was a principle which is about going deeper, exploring the energies which are behind things, not just on the surface of them. So when I actually got involved in organics, it didn't mean that it was an immediate split with the previous work. I felt a direct sense of continuation, and I got a huge level of sort of energetic excitement because of it, which enabled me to move ahead relatively quickly with the farming side of things and pour all my creativity into that, thus making, ultimately, 20 years later, looking back, the connection within, if you like, of the practical and the creative, and seeing that they're two completely connected issues, are not separate, they're not at war with each other, they're one thing underneath.
Wow, that is just beautiful. That's magnificent. What a journey.
Yeah.
That it just evokes so many images. As you were sharing your story, I was thinking of Siddhartha, the Buddha, how he left his wealthy family and he became poor and so on and so forth, and sat under the bodhisattva tree and so on and so forth. And then I was thinking of, when you were acting, I was thinking of Shakespeare. Well, we know now that Shakespeare wasn't necessarily the person who wrote those volumes. It might have been a consortium of people. It might have been one. It might have been two. We don't know for sure. We do know that the families were in control of the queens and installed them and manipulated and did every dirty trick under the sun to destroy anybody that tried to rock them from power, and it's still that way more than ever.
Yes, and the point there is so true. And the thing is, you see, now I was thrust into a situation in life where I was put in the position at a very young age, tender age of 19, when I inherited a 900-acre country estate and a title, I was put in the position of Illuminati. You know, I was being put in the position of someone who basically has a controlling influence and mixes entirely with people who have power and money. Therefore, you know, I had to fight hard to get the other side of myself, the real self, to come up and be strong enough to combat that. And not only to combat it, to set some form of example to those people how they've got it wrong.
Wow, you are definitely not of this world, because to be 19 and have everything under the sun and to be one of the elite. I mean, born into it. Here you are, 19. Most people would just, you know, sell their soul to do that.
Yeah,
and clearly, that's your path was the opposite, was to find your soul, and that is so rare because, as you know, that's not the programming that is acceptable on this planet. The programming is the opposite. We're in opposite land.
Yeah, so right, so right. Very perceptive remarks.
Did you get approached by, you know, obviously there are members of the Illuminati who don't identify themselves, but there are satanic aspects, there are groups that are involved with the pedophiles and the mafias and so on and so forth. They can get anything done. Were you exposed at all to the underbelly of the Illuminati?
I wouldn't say so, and it's actually quite interesting that I have definitely met and even to a degree worked with people who are very close to the Illuminati. But you see, the point about them is that there is actually a very shadowy, very small group of people who don't really put themselves into the public eye. And, you know, it's only very few people that get to meet them on the basis of doing business, let's put it that way. And I wasn't in that world, but I tell you, I did have a colleague, actually, who, for a while, it was actually because of a marriage. My sister married a banker, and he turned out to be someone who was very influential in the field of merchant banking. And I did have an extraordinary experience when I went into this bank once, and I had to meet a senior CEO of the bank in order to discuss possible funding for organic farming. And when I was introduced to the CEO of this bank, I almost froze sitting in his office because I couldn't detect a single emotion I recognized coming out of him, and I felt like there's something altogether weird here, and I want to get out of this place as quick as I possibly can. There's no hope that I'm actually going to get anything done that I want to get done. There's more chance that he will get something done that he wants done. You know, the sort of Archon mentality.
Yes, exactly.
So I did have that run in, and I have met people. You see, the thing is, it's like you were saying earlier on, it's like with the Masons. It's only actually at the top end of Masonry, that you get the people that really know about all the manipulation, the satanic rituals, you know, and all the power grabbing that goes through by tapping into the dark forces. Most of the funds further down the pyramid, they don't actually understand that's going on at all. They just think they're good moralistic people trying to help society, you know.
That's exactly right. Right. And, you know, we know that they say that there are 33 levels. Well, there are supposedly 33 levels of clearance that the president has, but there are probably several hundred above that. So, you know, you have various levels. It's a multidimensional control grid, and it's run by multidimensional beings who are not in our space and time, and they are extremely powerful, and they have technology that is so advanced that it has to be kept under wraps, because that's why Area 51 exists, underground bases, maglev trains that connect everybody, the Queen and anybody who's in that crowd can get anywhere they want, and then they just come up the elevator, and they're in, you know, and that is interplanetary as well. Bases on Mars, bases on Moon, Saturn, the rest of it. Interdimensional, moving into other dimensions. So those people have access to things that we can't even begin to imagine. And there's a whole technology that exists that is considered several levels above us, but I think there was one scientist who kind of defined a level 0 society, which is where we're at. We don't have the ability to travel and do time travel and the rest of it. Mm-hmm. But then there's the real deal, the people who are in on the true technology, and that's a level 1 civilization. There may be a level 2 civilization running the level 1. And then those people who are the managers, the royals and the rest, are just here to keep things, hold the contracts for what's going on here.
Well, yes, and a point there, I think, which comes out, which is salient to this conversation, is that this is what I was trying to describe in the article which you saw. This is a reverse, this is an imploded form of outward-going energy, which is the natural nature form of energy. It's reverse and imploded, and, if you like, a collapsed in upon itself form. Deliberately. I don't mean not undeliberately, deliberately.
Oh, yes.
Now, and therefore, what comes out of it, what is the opposite of spontaneity and love and joy? The opposite of that is something where you want absolute control and power over life. In other words, you don't participate in it or with it, which is like working with nature and organic farming. You basically take control of it. You stamp your mark on it, and that is what keeps you alive. So what we've actually got there, and what you're describing, is a situation where a total type of reverse psychology is operating. That's why we find it so difficult to understand it, which for us is pleasurable about life is exactly the opposite in them. They get the same pleasure from the power factor. It isn't pleasure. It isn't pleasure. It's a type of fuel which you get for having power over other people. You suck on that type of thing, and you get more power. And it's very much like what you might imagine something would be like at a level where almost nothing is functioning in the human body. I used the example in the essay about being on the ocean floor, where no light is getting through, where you just about swim around and grab things in order to survive, but there probably isn't any cognizance of any sort. Somehow this type of element has managed to increase its powers, but it's also managed to take on an extraordinary level of cunning and even genius in the process.
Oh, yes. That
Absolutely. Is what's so extraordinary about it. Yeah. That's why this technology has been...
One of my favorite guests is George Kavassilis in Australia, and he wrote a book, I think it's called Our Universal Journey. I should know because I helped edit it, but he writes about this. Yes, Our Universal Journey, and he goes into the galactic and intergalactic and beyond, and the control systems, and how we have literally come down from, that we have all been gods in our own creation, and we have literally come down through all these different galaxies, and now we are in further densification, and we came in here to basically shift this stalemate out that has been going on, in the sense of billions and trillions of years, which don't really exist. They only exist in the minds and perception of those who are being enslaved. And so he writes in great detail about that, and the Vatican and all of this stuff. He has actually journeyed out of the galaxy and has seen and experienced, and he's been tortured by various other beings. And so he has had direct experience, and it's a wonderful book. And then I just did a series of 20 video interviews with Andrew Bartzis, who talks about our galactic history and the 3 rises and falls of Atlantis and Lemuria, and the 15 interdimensional beings that were sitting back watching the dark, and this was 50 million years ago, watching the dark and the light fight it out, and they simply waited for the perfect moment, and then they came in and booted them all out. And then they brought the archons in, they ran them through a God program and brought the archons in to run the incarnational grids. And so Earth's natural incarnation process was suppressed, and she has been suppressed. And so, you know, these beings have control centers all over the globe. And, you know, the things that we don't know about is that there are super soldiers that have been created. They're literally taken out of their body after these interdimensional and astral projects that they're sent on, that our DNA is being sent off-world for, you know, vast sums of money. The wars where people are killed going back, you know, thousands of years are all about collecting DNA and becoming, the first species. And there, in 50 million years ago, he said they began time wars to establish the first species of Earth, because the one that could establish the first species of Earth would be the one that won at the end of the game. So then the light forces, who were unprepared for this kind of cleverness, would then have to react by retaliating and bringing in forces that knew how to fight wars, and going back into a further period and establishing the first species. So supposedly there are 72 species that are on Earth, and there have been time wars for 50 million years.
My God. Well, that's extraordinary, isn't it?
It's you know, it could be even more complex than that, but we do know that there are super soldiers who have been removed from their body. One of them talks about it, and he said that they removed the one person to keep him, you know, he was sent on so many missions, they didn't want him, if he got caught, to ever be able to say anything, even though the information was compartmentalized. So they simply removed his essence or soul and put it into a 7 or 8 year old. And so, you know, they're able to do things like this, and horrific things. I mean, absolutely things that by what they're doing, removing the DNA off planet. They're, in some instances, they've killed billions and trillions of people just by leaving in a certain way. And I mean, it's ruthless. It's absolutely ruthless. There's just no conscience whatsoever. So whether or not any of that is true doesn't matter. We can see the results of that kind of behavior right here.
We certainly can. We absolutely can. And you know, this makes it the imperative, if you like, that this brings up is for us to, what I call very often, spark what I call the warrior spirit in ourselves. I would even call it shamanic. There is a certain level in us which is angry in a positive spirit. Now, I relate that to the solar plexus, actually, not to the brain. And I think there's a sun at the center of our solar system. And well, I shouldn't be able to. It's called the solar plexus. And I think if we can crank that sun up a bit more, get it really hot in there, but then know how to control the energy which comes out of it. Now, this is how the shamans work. Medicine men, shamans, warriors for the light. I'm talking about the ancient, you know, the old Indian chiefs, etc., the Apaches and all these people, and the shamans of South America. They have, out of wisdom almost entirely gleaned from nature, it comes back and back again and again to nature, they have been able to understand their relationship with nature. They've been able to understand how the powers which exist at the universal and at the terrestrial level can be utilized through man's, we can basically channel those powers through our own bodies, through our own minds, through our own thinking. And only once we can do that do we start having the ability to stand up and match these sort of people that you're describing, entities, excuse me, because you can't describe them as people. So actually, we are being called upon to do something which is not popular with the average spiritual person who is interested in meditation, pure and simple, is usually pacifistic, is certainly non-violent in spirit, and I don't think that's right. But basically, we've still got a major job to do within our own movement, if you like, of people who are moving towards the light, because we have a division which says, and I mentioned at the beginning of the program, to take action, to go out there to try and stop something happening, is a contradiction to the spiritual path, because taking that action is an aggressive, outgoing thing, and you are clashing with something, and that is not the solution. The solution is to change everything from within, change yourself first, and by changing yourself, it will automatically change the world. Now, you see what I'm trying to get at is it's very subtle. There's a fine, balanced line, like the line that goes between yin and yang, which we need to take that, we need to walk that tightrope, recognize the truth in both sides of the argument, and say, okay, put the two together, take the inner power, the inner spiritual ability, the inner light, but also take action in the shamanic spirit, if you like, and confront the reality, the truth, the demonic. Confront it. Don't shy away from it. Don't shy away, but confront it. And by confronting it, you'll gain even more power. You'll gain even more ability. Each courageous act that you take will give you more strength and more power. The more you avoid having to take a courageous act, the more you will actually diminish the potential to be able to make the change. So, in a certain sense, I actually do rather feel that we need to concentrate ourselves on the ability to raise that level within ourselves of activism. I mean, I use it with a capital A. That is happening on this globe, thank goodness, much more now than it was 10 years ago. Thousands, if not millions of people are very motivated. You'd be amazed the number of emails we get, Jadwiga and I, every day, hundreds from different activists all over Europe who are planning different types of reaction against Monsanto, against the attempt to take control over the food chain so that seeds are no longer allowed to be swapped by farmers. That's just about happening for the European Union very, very shortly. Taking, all these different issues. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people now coming forward and fighting this and getting the information out there, warning the public, making the public aware, having raising awareness so that at the political level there is a possibility of making someone who's basically just doing what he's told do what he's told by us rather than do what he's told by them.
Right. Right,
that is really possible. If enough of us get onto it, we can do it.
It is very possible, and I see it as it's really part of my own path is to do everything in my ability and my power to expand exponentially this quintessential invisible force that we're talking about within us, and expand it out into the world that we are living in, so that it is literally transformed, and it's an almost instantaneous transformation because it's been building for so long.
Yes, it has. And actually, we have no idea of what powers there are in that well. We're drawing upon it, and we're discovering it, we're nurturing it, we're getting to know it. I think it's said that the neocortex of the human being, we lose 1/16 of the potential that we have. We've been around having this a few million years, but we've just about got as far as using a roughly 1/16 of but maybe it's even less than that. I can't remember. But, we've only just started finding out at the cutting edge of biology that every cell in the human body is an intelligent, sentient being in its own right.
Yeah.
Having a dialogue with the environment, not just with the DNA of our grandparents,
Yeah.
I mean, all this is just beginning to emerge in front of us, and it's absolutely fantastic stuff. It shows you that we have got the most amazing potential to make change. It'll make those people that you're describing with crazy technologies look incredibly flat-footed, ultimately.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, we will be tapping into, we already have the information. I think what's happening is it's just evolving in us to the point where we can use it. Mm-hmm. We'll be bilocating. We'll be traveling multidimensionally. And as far as our power goes, those beings that have held power for so many millions of years, however long that they have been managing universes under domination and control, they will simply crumble
Exactly.
They simply, it will be like our field will be so strong that it will be in harmony, and their dissonance will be their undoing.
Absolutely right. I'm sure that's true. And, there are examples on a rather more mundane level in which we've discovered through the use of the modern electromagnetic telescopes and satellites going deeper into space and then photographing what's beyond, of the concept of the black hole. And the black hole is not a permanent situation. And it was something else I was saying in the essay, that everything is in evolution in life. Everything's in a process of change. There is nothing which isn't changing. Every cell in our body is dying and being reborn every day, millions and millions and millions of them. So, there's no doubt that this control system, which is, as you rightly say, had the upper hand for a very long time now, is now waning. Something else is happening. And what we're doing, I think, we humans, so to speak, is we're learning our role within that change. And we're learning how to use it, and we're learning what the powers are that we have in order to use it. And it's a learning process, and it's also a process, it's also a very responsible one. I want to just briefly mention how I believe it's very responsible, because actually it's something, it's a type of wisdom and knowledge which is a thing of great beauty and fragility, and therefore it has to be carefully nurtured, and therefore we have to use it very carefully, and we mustn't just get overexcited by it and start splashing it around everywhere. We have to use it like an artist, like a great artist would on the stage,
Yeah,
and that's,
very well said. That's very important aspect of what's going on. I am in total agreement with you on that one. That's a major piece of the jigsaw puzzle, and I constantly remind myself of that when I find myself excited about this or that or the other thing. That it's to continue in observation mode and in neutrality, and to not get sucked into the drama, and no matter what happens, to remember remember myself, first of all, but to remember what I'm doing and that I'm creating here. So it is really like a palette, only at some point our thoughts will literally manifest everything around us. And so it seems that it would be wise to begin the process of managing one's thoughts and actions.
Well, that's it. That's exactly it. Managing one's thoughts is spot on. And there is a tendency, and Lance, you would have seen it from looking over the internet in recent times, and to all the alternative sites which now exist, and a lot of them exploring the very issues we're talking about. Perhaps in the comments section of some of these, you get people blathering off in incredible ways, and they're basically losing the very energy which we should be nurturing. It's being thrown to the wind, and this is not what our Creator had in mind. I don't think our Creator would be at all pleased to see this use. Once we find we've got a spark which connects to the essence of life, they wouldn't be pleased to see the way that's being thrown around, bandied around, and sort of played with. It's a huge responsibility once you start becoming enriched by this experience, aware.
Absolutely.
The responsibility grows in direct tandem with the level of awareness which we get.
Yes. And that also includes that the more conscious we become, the less there is of the unconscious aspects. And so that also is one of the processes that raises our awareness. And as I find for myself that the more awake or aware I am, which is a kind of like an oscillating wave, the more conscience exists.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the missing pieces of those that you describe in your writings that have become so covered by darkness that there is little or no conscience, because they have to have none to be able to feed off of that which has consciousness. So they work through the unconscious, and I believe that the collective consciousness of mankind should be renamed the collective unconsciousness. We're not conscious beings yet. We're just barely awake, and some more than others, but we're in a continuum of consciousness. And I know G.I. Gurdjieff, and P.D. Ouspensky both worked on bringing this information to light, that we're not fully formed yet. We have to take responsibility for completing our own evolution, and that's where, if we believe that we're already awake and aware, and we have consciousness, then there's no, what is there to search for? We're already awake. What are you talking about? I'm not conscious. And so, we think we're already conscious, but there are degrees of consciousness and levels of consciousness. And so by understanding that we have to finish our own evolution, that opens the doors to learning new energies, taking in new energies, which is really basically what we're talking about. And the new energies are the old energies of nature and spirits and nature spirits, and listening to our soul and the divine sources that are trying to communicate with us, and the other dimensions. And, I think that it's all there. We're multidimensional beings. We're probably infinite and eternal light, and we have numerous forms of ourselves everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So.
Yes, so that's a lovely conundrum, isn't it? Yes.
It is. You have to be able to live with paradox if you're going to awaken, because that's all there is at a certain level.
Yes, that is so true. That is so. Well, and then, of course, what comes in there, Lance, and this is very close to my heart, is what I call cosmic humor.
Oh, yes. Me too. I mean, me too.
Sometimes you just got to hoot with laughter about it all.
Yes.
It's so incredible, and it's just incredibly funny. And I sometimes think once we do that, all the gods start laughing too, sharing the joke.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
It's a great feeling. It's a great feeling. You hear them all booming away up there, joining in with us.
They're doing it now.
And by having a fantastically good laugh, you actually clear an enormous amount of stuff.
Oh, yes.
Which, it's a brilliant thing, this sort of cosmic humor. There are so many aspects of the paradox which actually resolve themselves through... the Buddha was always depicted as a splendidly fat fellow with a large, rather beautiful head, and with a permanent smile on his face, and always somehow laughing. Yeah. And that's quite interesting when you think about it, because the influence of the Buddhistic field on planet Earth is huge, and many, many people are following that approach to life. But out of them, relatively few seem to have adapted to his particular sense of humor.
Well, everything gets co-opted.
Yes.
If we're not there in the moment to witness it, and we probably are at many levels, then the beings that are using domination and control and technology can simply overwrite and manipulate the information so that it turns. And slowly there's a deviation. Well, there's a law of octaves, for instance. And in an octave, there are 2 points where something can deviate. It's between the mi-fa and si-do interval. And if you don't keep your original intent, then you may think you're creating a movement of love and light, and what happens is it eventually keeps turning, and it becomes its own opposite. So that's a cosmic law. And so you see movements, the New Age movement was probably created in essence to divert the beings like us who are holding enough light to communicate it from really connecting, because then what happens is personalities start rising, and the need for money forces people to ask for donations and do seminars, and then before you know it, you have people who are gurus, and then you have, David Icke and other people who are, making huge amounts of money. I'm not saying that that's bad. He has a good message, but you can't help but become co-opted, because then you become one of the elite, basically, the very thing that you're talking about and trying to expose.
It's so difficult to avoid that. I think, that is the absolute classic trap. It seems to be the hardest thing of all to avoid. Every story of every revolution, so to speak, that's taking place on the earth has always landed up falling for that particular trap. So
Absolutely.
Actually, it seems that this time round, we really do have to learn that lesson.
Well, yes.
It's absolutely number one essential element. And I very much like the phrase you used that we have to take responsibility for the managing our own evolution. That's a very powerful phrase, and that you should use that a lot. The ability to see both sides of something and to take a position which is the one one's deep intuition is telling one to go for, and to hang on to it,
Yes.
to hang on to it. That really is an amazing challenge. That is entering the underworld like I was describing Theseus going to slay the Minotaur, That
Yes.
little thread is our intuition. That's what it is. It's a symbolic reference to our intuition, deep intuition. And that deep intuition is our connecting point to our Creator. But the difficulty to hold on to it when all these various temptations are put in front of us, and as you rightly said, to make one or two mistakes along that line sets one back on a situation where one eventually is eating one's own tail, and one never realized it. One thought one was still going forward.
Right. And in your mind, nothing has changed. I can give you some vivid examples in my own life. Years ago, well, my parents were both bohemians and alcoholics, so what did I do? I became a bohemian gay alcoholic. And so for 20 or 30 years I was drinking myself to death, and although I did a lot of experiments with psychedelics and things, which did open the doors and did show me other worlds, so I can see where that has value. And now today people are involved with ayahuasca and journeying and so on and so forth. But I think everybody has to find their own path.
Exactly. And interesting you described that particular journey you went on, Lance, and I saw already from your introduction about you on your website that you'd been through this experience. And I was thinking to myself, it turns out, honestly, actually I know 4 or 5 people who could share this type of conversation we're having tonight. I don't actually know many more than that. Maybe if I really thought about it, maybe 20 in the world. But almost every one of these people has suffered a lot. Yes. It's an interesting phenomenon. I don't believe in the sort of morality that says you've got to go out there and suffer. Like the old sort of religious view
right.
that is taken in Christianity or even in Catholicism, whatever. You've got to suffer in order to, go up the ladder to heaven. No, that's not what I'm talking about. No. I'm talking about it has taken a certain number of things put in our path, very really put in our path, hurdles, which we've had to jump or get through. And those, each time we've had to go through or jump on these hurdles, opened up a bit more of our awareness and our consciousness. So ultimately, when you look back on it, you say, oh, wow, what would I have done if I hadn't had to go through that? Which, and actually, you see, we've gained so much from it. And that shows you that there is some cosmic Leela, some great plan, which our Creator puts in front of us as part of our overall evolution, which means you still, karma, it's karmic, essentially, is, in the essence of the word karma, that we still have to go through more phases. And it sometimes, and nearly always actually, involves going to extremes. You have to go something extreme in order to get to the point which shows you the middle way, the balanced way. For most people, I think that probably is a reality. I certainly had similar experiences to you. I had to go to extremes in order to find a central balanced path. But I didn't choose deliberately in advance, I've got to go to extremes. It's just that my intuition took me down that road, and I did it.
I could talk to you for hours, Julian. And so the people who will hear this will be just thrilled to hear what we're talking about. And let's do this again really, really soon.
Well, thank you, Lance. It's been a great pleasure talking with you. And as you say, we can surely go on further, but I think everybody needs a rest now, including the listeners.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I'll be in touch, and everybody will know about your website because I'm going to be shouting it from the rooftops with julianrose.info.
That's it. Lovely.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Julian.
Thank you.